Okay, I think everyone has trickled in, so let's go ahead and start with the webinar. Again, my name is Parker Stevens. I am a Microsoft Data Platform MVP and Certified Power BI Professional. I'm going to be walking you through 7 tips and tricks that you should add to your reports within Power BI. These are 7 tricks and different functionalities of Power BI that will allow you to really get the most out of Power BI. Hopefully you've been with us for one of our other webinars. If you have been, you will see that this report is actually pretty familiar. We walked through how to build this exact report last week or last webinar. But we're actually going to make this report even more dynamic by adding some of these tips and tricks that we're going to walk through today. So I'm going to open up my base file. This is our 7 Power BI tips file, and we are going to basically walk through each tab, which is going to highlight a different tip and trick in Power BI. So let's go ahead and start by hopping on over to our first tab, which is titled Bookmarks. So bookmarks are amazing within Power BI. They pretty much offer you with 2 different functionalities. The first one is saving states. So imagine you have a report and you always filter down to a certain subset of data. Bookmarks are going to allow you to basically save that state so you can just quickly hop on over to the certain view that you frequently look at. Another functionality of bookmarks is it allows you to hide and show visuals on the page just by a click of a button. So this saves a lot of space in case you need to basically dynamically hide something or show something depending on what the user has clicked. So for example, I'm going to show you that second example really quick. I have an arrow here on the left, which actually allows us to pop out a slicer panel when we click it. So we can make our selections to the slicer, or we can select something in the second slicer, and then we can just hide it, and all of our data stays the same. So it has a nice hide and collapse, or show and collapse functionality. So that's kind of what we're going to be building today. Let's go ahead and hop on over to another file that is basically the same one, but without anything built out. So in order to set up this first trick, let's go ahead and add a couple of items here. We will go to home. We can add a shape. I'm going to add a little arrow on the left side, like we had in the other file. I'm going to rotate it a little bit so it's facing right to give the user an idea that it's going to pop out to the right. And then we also need to basically set up our slicer panel. So we're going to do that by adding another shape. We're going to add a rectangle. And this rectangle, we can leave it at that color. I think that'll work. We can add a couple of slicers here as well. So we can add our slicer visual onto the left side. And this visual is going to be populated with one of our fields. We can populate it based on any of the categories we have here on the right side. Let's go ahead and set it to continent. And let's go ahead while we're here. Let's move this visual up on the page, up on the Z-axis so that we can see it. The way we do that is we go to View, Selection Pane, and we can see our visual as a shape. Let's move that all the way up to the top so it sits on top. Our slicer that we just added, let's go ahead and throw that on the top as well. Let's figure out which one it is. It's that one. So let's put that on top as well. So that's better. Let's add one more slicer. So we'll copy that one, paste it down below. Oh, sorry, clicking on the background a little bit. Let's go ahead and move this down. Set this to a different field. Let's set up product type. Now let's add product specifically. So now they can filter on a bunch of different things, continent, product. So if I were to click on Europe and maybe something down here, we can see that that selection carries over to the main page. So now what we need to do is we need to set up the actual bookmark functionalities. Actually, I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's add one more shape, an arrow to work as the collapse button up here in the top left. And we'll rotate it 270 degrees this time and move it to the top. So now it's sitting on top. Great. So now we'll set up the actual bookmarks. In order to do that, we need to go to View and the Bookmarks pane. That's going to open it up on the right side. We will add a bookmark. and we can name this bookmark. This is going to be the slicer panel view. So slicer panel view. A very important thing to note about bookmarks is pretty much all the time you're going to want to uncheck the data button. Basically what that's going to mean is when you're switching between bookmarks, you don't want to keep the selection, or you do want to keep the selection of your filters. If that were to be checked, you would be overriding your filter selection every time you switched. So we're going to want to uncheck that. So now when we need to hide these shapes in order to make our other bookmarked view, we'll add this bookmark. We're going to call it something like base view. And we will uncheck data again. So now we can manually switch between our views. So that's looking great. Then we just need to set up our actual arrows to be used as like a button to pop out or hide that filter pane. So we can do that by clicking on action, turning that on, and setting the type to bookmark, and bookmark equal to slicer panel view. So now when we click this arrow, it'll pop out our little slicer panel. And then we need to set this bookmark to have the action for bookmark, and the bookmark is base view. So now we can click between the two. Let's say we open it up and change it to Asia, North America, Australia. So we have all those selections. We can then hide it, and we still have our selections. So that's kind of the first way in which bookmark can allow us to save space and kind of add an extra dimension of flexibility to our Power BI report. At this point, I'm going to take us over to the Power BI service, so the Power BI cloud offering, and show you how you can set up personalized bookmarks to allow you to switch between views that you frequently go to. So let's go ahead and hop on over to our Power BI report on the Power BI cloud. So this is the exact same report. If I go to the Bookmarks tab, we can see I already have it set up with the little slicer panel we just set up. But instead, let's go ahead and set up a personal bookmark. So let's go ahead and reset to default just so we can see the default view of this report. Let's extend this date range. Let's just extend it all the way. So we have all products and we have profit by default here. So let's say we wanted a view that we go to all the time. Let's say I only ever look at this current year's data, or actually for this report, 2018 data, the most recent data. And let's say I only ever look at let's open this filter. Say I only ever look at packs. Oh, sorry, I think I have a filter down here. Let me make sure everything is off. So let's say I frequently look at tenths. Sorry, let me select that. I frequently look at tenths, and let's say I care about the revenue. This is a view that I always go to. We can set up a bookmark, a personal bookmark, and name it something like 2018 tenths revenue. So you can see I had already created a 2017 tenths quantity. So actually we can just filter between the two. So if I want to go to the 2017 tenths quantity, or just quickly switch over to the 2018 tenths revenue, it's that easy. So any one of your users can set up their personal views. You can also see down here, there's this other bookmark section, and that's basically going to show people the other bookmarks that the developer has created. So in our case, we have the filter pane and the base, but instead, if we wanted to create a maybe like a 2018 only view, we could extend that out to all of our users, and they could simply click on the 2018 view. So bookmarks are very flexible and allow you to go in a lot of different directions within Power BI. So I definitely recommend incorporating this at least to some degree in your Power BI reports. So that's pretty much the first trick on bookmarks. Let's go ahead and hop on over to the second tab. The second tab is going to take us through the drill through functionality. Drill through allows you to move from one tab to another, but carry your selections through to that second tab and kind of drill into a more detail-based view. So for example, I have this tab here that we are very familiar with, and on the 2B tab, I have a table with all of our orders. So we can see on the left side, we have all of these order IDs showing. So if I were on the first tab, oh, and also one thing to note, let me go ahead and get rid of our selection here. So now I have all of my orders. I also have some extra filters here. Let me just extend it out so it doesn't, so it's not confusing. We see that we have order IDs starting from 1 all the way down throughout our data. So let's say we were on the 2A tab and we wanted to only see China orders. So while we're on this tab and we have it filtered down to China, let's go ahead and right click and drill through to that drill through tab. And what you'll be able to see is now our retail country in this table is only showing China. So basically we have drilled down even further from our previous page into our detail page, but keeping that selection. So in case I now wanted, let's say Finland, I can do that one more time and drill through, and we only have Finland orders. So I'm going to show you how you can set this up. It's very easy to do, very quick out of the box. So let's hop on over to the other file, and we're going to close a couple of items to make our space a little bit bigger. So from 2A, we have the normal setup. Basically, all the magic happens on the landing page, the page that you land on when you drill through. So let's go ahead and set up a basic table. We can do this pretty easily. Let's just add some items here. So we'll add order ID, we'll add our date, we'll add, let's say, continent, retailer country, retailer type, and then maybe just a quick revenue cost. Oh, sorry, I should have been looking. I need to click on the table first. Let's go ahead and do that again. Order ID, date, continent, retailer country, retailer type, revenue, and cost. So those are the fields we want to show. Specifically, order ID needs to be not summarized. That was counting them. So we're going to go ahead and extend our date range again. So as you can see right now, we are showing all of our orders. We have all retailer countries here. So we have United States. If we scroll down, we see we have Canada. So in order to set up drill through, all we need to do is look on this right side in the visualizations pane, and we see that we have a drill through field. So we can add whatever fields we want here that should be carried from one page to the next. So let's mix it up a little bit. Let's go ahead and throw in retailer type. Actually, we don't have a visual here on retailer type now that I think about it. So let's go ahead and stick with retailer country. So if we were to throw in retailer country into the drill through filters, we would be able to drill through by right clicking on any country, drill through, and we see that 2B is now available to us to drill through. So if we drill through, we see that now we're only showing the Mexico retailer country. So one thing to note about drill through that can kind of trip you up if you're not aware, there is this option that says keep all filters. What that means is when you're drilling through from one field to the next, if you want Power BI to keep the filters that were associated with that previous page. So if we were to open up 2A, we see that we had this this selection from September 3rd, 2018 to the end of 2018. We also were only looking at lanterns. So on our drill through page, it kept those filters. We see that product type equals lanterns. We see that the date is after September 3rd, 2018. So that can be kind of confusing if you don't want the user to carry all of those filters from one page to the next. So let's go ahead and take those out. Let's erase Mexico, so we're down to our kind of blank canvas here, and let's uncheck keep all filters. So then when we're on the 2A page and we filter or drill through for Germany, we can see that it's not throwing in any other filters. So we only see retailer country is Germany. It's not throwing in the date filter, the product type filter, or our measure selection even. This is, you know, kind of basically there's not one way that's better than the other, but I'm just kind of showing you basically the options for drill through. Maybe you might decide that one way is more intuitive for you and your organization, and that's fine. But you know, now you know how that keep all filters kind of works with drill through. So as of recently, drill through was actually introduced to allow you to drill from one report to another. So if I had another report titled, you know, anything else, I could drill through from this individual report to another report. So that's kind of adds to the flexibility of Power BI as well. So in case you have maybe one report that, you know, only shows top level metrics, you can drill through to a more detailed report if necessary. And those reports can have different levels of access as well. So it kind of gives you an extra check on the permissions of those reports. So that's pretty much the entire drill through rundown. Let's go ahead and hop over to the third trick, which is hierarchies. So in our base file, we can see how hierarchies work a little bit. So there are two different kinds of hierarchies in Power BI that you should be aware of. The first one are date hierarchies. Date hierarchies are set up by default by Power BI. So whenever you import a date field, it's going to set you up with a hierarchy that starts with year and then goes through, actually, let me go ahead and throw this in real quick. So our date field, if we throw it into an axis of a visual, we can see it has this automatic hierarchy of year, quarter, month, and day. And this hierarchy, whenever you have one, it allows you to drill down further into the visual. And I just want to be clear, drill down as in deeper into a visual, not drill through from one tab to another. So we can drill down into only this visual. So if we were to, since we're on the year level, we can drill down into the quarter level and then drill into the month level and then finally drill into the day level. So I want to take you through the different ways in which you can drill down in Power BI because they can be very confusing, but they're all useful in their own regards. So the first is this single drill down arrow. When you click on it, you enable drill down. So if I were to select a single year, so let's say 2017, and I click on it, I've now drilled into 2017, but I've gone to the next level, which is quarters. So now if I clicked on the second quarter in April, we can see that now I'm in 2017 in quarter 2, but now it's on the month level. And then finally I drill down into, let's say, May, and we're showing all 31 days of May on that day level. So basically you're keeping the selections of each individual level that you're clicking through. So we can drill up all the way, and we'll talk about the second way you can drill down. So this drill down functionality is going to allow you to drill down from one level to another, but not keep the dimension of the previous level. So as you can see, we have the years 2016, 2017, 2018. If we were to drill down with the double down arrow, it simply puts all the data on a quarter level. So it's not taking into account the division of year. So 2016, 2017, 2018 data is all kind of mixed into these divisions. Now quarter 1, quarter 2, and quarter 3, quarter 4. So if we were to drill down again, we see now we're only looking at the month level, but with no respect to years or quarters. So we can drill up, and finally our final way to drill down is with this downward kind of forked arrows. This drills down but keeps the previous level in consideration. So if we were to drill down, we see now we have 2016, but we also have that split up by quarter. And if we were to drill down even further, we have 2016 split up by quarter and month now. And then finally, with a bunch of data, we have basically on the day level, but keeping the idea of the year, quarter, and month. So basically, there are a lot of different ways that you can drill deeper into your data. This is made very easy by the fact that Power BI creates these out-of-the-box date hierarchies. So next, I'm going to show you how you can set up your own hierarchies. Basically, these are going to be hierarchies that don't have to be specific to any field. They don't have to be a date. Basically, just any different representation of levels of your data you can create yourself. So on the left side, we can see that we have kind of the similar bar chart we've been seeing, but now it's split up by continent. We have Europe, North America, Asia, Australia, and South America. I have already set up a hierarchy here on the left side. Basically, it's continent and then retailer country. So using the exact same methods of drill down, we can drill down into any of those continents. And now we're showing it on the country level. So we can use the forked down arrow and just see it on the level of all of the different countries split up by continent. So it's actually very easy to set up these hierarchies. I'm going to hop on over to the other file just to set that up really quickly. So when we have our bar chart with just retailer country, there are two ways in which we can set up a hierarchy, a custom hierarchy. So I'm going to go ahead and delete one that I had already created. So right now we only have one value in this bar chart. That's why there's just a single line. So the first way in which we can create a hierarchy is by grabbing just the top level of our data. So now that our data is split up by continent, and then throwing the second level right under the first level. So now we have continent and then retailer country underneath it. Very easy to do. You're just basically throwing in extra fields into the axis. That's one way to do it. It can get a little bit messy and you may forget what you had added to these visuals. I think the best way to do it, to create your own custom hierarchy, is to simply take the bottom level of your hierarchy, which will be retailer country, and drag it onto the top level. So we can see, we can drag retailer country onto continent, and it's going to create this content hierarchy here on the right, and we can simply drag this content hierarchy into the axis. So now we have the exact same functionality of continent and then retailer country. But let's say I also wanted product type on top of this hierarchy. We can drag product type onto the hierarchy and it adds it to the bottom. Simply, we need to add our content hierarchy, our continent hierarchy back into the axis well, and we see we can now drill down on multiple levels. So that's pretty cool functionality. Hierarchies are out of the box in Power BI, but they also add a lot of flexibility as well. With that, let's go ahead and hop on over to probably my favorite trick of this demonstration, and that's dynamic metrics. As you may have seen in this report already, we have this little slicer up here that allows you to change the page to show a certain metric of your choosing. So I have nothing selected here, and by default, it defaults to total profit. If I were to click on total quantity, we see how the data changes to show quantity, and then revenue. We can see that those are on very different scales. So this is 550 million, while quantity is on the scale of 10 million. So I'm going to show you how you can set up dynamic metrics. So when you click on a button, you're able to actually just change what's being shown in the entire Power BI report. This is a very cool method. It's a little bit more in depth and takes a little bit of code, but it's totally worth it if you stick with me and kind of learn how you can write these measures yourself. So in our other file, on our dynamic metrics page, I have just a normal visual here. This is just the retailer country that we've seen so many times already, and just a simple field, quantity. So by default in Power BI, when you're setting up your visuals, you're basically just going to drag columns onto these different little wells, and it's going to create these visuals for you. So we see that I'm just summing sales quantity, and that's what's showing in our visual. If you want to get a little bit more in depth, we can create what's called a measure. And a measure is basically a calculation within Power BI that evaluates for each different filter that's being applied to that visual. I know that may sound like a lot, but we'll walk through an easy example to kind of wade into it. So we can right click on our table and click new measure. And we can name this selected metric, and we can simply hold on, give me 1 second. I think I might have one that's called selected metric. Yes, I do. I'm going to go ahead and delete that so we don't name it the same thing. So I am going to create that new measure. We're going to call this one selected metric. And just for ease of understanding how measures are created, let's go ahead and just make this an easy sum of revenue. I am already using that on this table. We'll call this selected metric 2 for that reason. So we are simply summing revenue. If we were to take our selected metric 2 and throw it in the value, we can see that we are now just summing the revenue. Ignore the total quantity title. I'll actually get rid of the title. So we are simply summing the revenue for each division of the data. So the revenue for the United States of America is 27 million. And funny enough, we can even drill through to our other page. That's actually pretty cool. But we are actually going to make our selected metric 2 much more dynamic by not hard coding the revenue field in here. We're going to give some conditional we're going to give a conditional formula to allow a selection of the metric that should be summed. In order to do that, we're going to add a table. Basically, this table is going to give us all of our different selectable metrics. In order to do that, let's go ahead and go to home and enter data. And then we're going to call this, we'll call this metrics. We'll call the column metrics as well. So this is going to be basically just the options you want to show in the selectable buttons. So we'll just do cost, revenue, quantity. Click load, and this is actually going to create a table within Power BI. So we'll let that load for just 1 second. And now we're going to add another slicer. So we'll take a slicer, we'll put it up in the top right, and our metrics table, we have our metrics column. throw it in there. We have cost, quantity, revenue. We can make that button look a little bit better with basically the general allows us to set the orientation. So that looks a little bit better. So we can click on cost, quantity, or revenue. It doesn't do anything right now because this table isn't tied to anything. But if we go back to our measure, we can write some logic that will allow us to specify if revenue is selected, show us revenue. If cost is selected, show us cost. So in order to do that, we are going to use what's similar to an if statement. It's actually called switch. This is also in Excel, so you may have used it there. It's basically going to evaluate for a certain expression, and if that expression evaluates to true, then it is going to basically fire on that condition, or it'll go down to the next one if it's false. So we are going to evaluate for true, and then simply we need to say if cost is in all selected of our metrics column. And basically this is kind of a fancy way to say is cost in our selections. Then we want to sum the cost. Basically, if this isn't true, we want to run the second line. So we're going to do revenue next. If revenue is in the selected metrics, we want to sum revenue. And if that's also not true, we actually don't need this condition here. We can just say if that's not true, our else condition will be summing quantity. Get rid of the comma, close off our function. And now all we have to do is use our new measure. So we have selected metric 2. So we have our cost, quantity, and revenue. So if we click on cost, we see that our axis is changing here. We see quantity, which will be much smaller. We see that it's changing. So now we are able to dynamically select the measure we want to show in this graph. As a little bit of a bonus, let's go ahead and add a title to this that's also dynamic. I actually already have that set up, so I'll just go ahead and throw it in there because I don't know if we'll have enough time for that. So if you set on the title, you can come here and set conditional formatting to that title text. So we already had a measure here that's called title, and I'll run you through that in a second. So let's go ahead and look at that title measure. So basically this has logic to say, get us the selected value of our table in the top right. And if there is more than one value, that's what this second parameter is telling us, we want to basically fall back on a certain title. So our default is cost. So now it'll work as expected. So basically if cost is selected, it'll show cost, quantity, revenue, or if nothing is selected, it'll show cost because cost is our default within our visual. So this is very, very dynamic. You can have a list of however many metrics you want to show here. You can have a whole side of them and just go through each of these. Saves a lot of space and allows you not to have to duplicate pages of work just to show different metrics. And you can use this measure in as many visuals as you want so that you really don't need to repeat yourself. I would say this is a best practice in case you have, let's say, more than 3 metrics to show inside of your Power BI dashboard. So yeah, that's a really cool one. I guess we'll jump to number 5, which is forecasting. Forecasting is a very fun one. I'll jump back to the other file. Our forecasting, there are a couple of different options here. We can see on the left as the one on the right loads is the built-in Power BI forecasting method. It allows you to look at these, basically look at the historical data and be able to project fairly accurately, depending on some of the factors, what you might expect in the future. So we can actually make this much smaller in case we want to get a smaller idea. You see with less data, it has a smaller sample size to make a prediction, but we can expand that back out. Also, we can see that there is another kind of way to forecast here in Power BI. This is a custom visual, so not a visual inherent to Power BI. It's actually a visual that someone has written and submitted to the Microsoft Store or the Microsoft Power BI App Source store so that other users can download and use that visual. So this one is pretty cool because it allows you to kind of zoom in on some data. You can see if we just kind of zoom in, get a smaller view of our data. So pretty cool functionality, allows you to kind of hover over and see where those forecasted points are looking at. But I'll walk you through how to set up each of these. The built-in solution takes just a second, so we can go ahead and start with that. So in our other file, in our forecasting, we can simply create a line chart with our date in our axis, and we can use our new selected metric in the values. So we want to get rid of our date hierarchy in this case because we don't really care about that hierarchy. We can click this down arrow and click on date instead of date hierarchy. So now we have all of our data here, which we can filter down or expand back out. And in order to show the forecasting, you can easily go on the Analytics tab here on the Visualizations pane. Click on Analytics, and all the way at the bottom, there is a forecast expandable section. There are also a lot of other expandable sections in case you need them, but we'll focus on the forecasting here. Then we need to click Add, which will create a forecast line. We can see it right there, but it's kind of short. We can forecast a certain number of points or a certain number of periods. So if we want to forecast a full year out or a couple months, we can actually forecast maybe 5, or let's do 6 months in the future. We can click Apply and see the forecast that it comes up with. It doesn't show too much here. We can set and ignore a certain number of periods selected. We can set a different confidence interval. That confidence interval is going to shrink or expand what it kind of estimates for that prediction. We'll leave it at 95. And seasonality is interesting because this is a parameter that you'll probably need to play with in order to get a prediction that's looking pretty good. So in our data, our data is probably pretty seasonal based on month or week. So if we set seasonality based on 30 days, which would equal a month, we see a little bit better of a representation there. Let's try week and see what it comes up with. So if we have a seasonality of 7 days, since we're on the day level, not too much better. But we'll also see that the forecast will vary depending on the amount of data we are passing into it. So it's picking up on something, but nothing too crazy. I already got rid of some of the dependent visuals. Let's hop on over to the other visual and see what we had here. So in our forecasting, we had a seasonality of auto actually. So if you leave auto, Power BI is able to pick up on some of that seasonality dependent on some of your filters. So basically with all the data, it's able to get a pretty strong prediction of that data. So pretty cool there. We're also able to visualize those actual data points in case we wanted to dig into it. So let's hop on over to the other file. So the other Power BI visual that we're going to look at for forecasting, you can get it from the store I was telling you about. So it's called the Marketplace here. So we can import from Marketplace and search for forecasting and find a bunch of different visuals here. They use different methods. For instance, this is using the ARIMA method in order to get a nice time series prediction. I like this one. This is the one I was showing you. We can simply add this visual to our palette here. So I had already imported it in, so we'll just update it. So we see it available to us on the right. It also has a nice little explanation that this runs an R package. We don't need to install that. So since this is kind of taking some machine learning and data science into this Power BI report, it is running an R script or an R script in order to calculate those predictions. Power BI supports both R and Python scripts. So actually that's specifically an R script. We can click on our visual here and bring it into the canvas. And in order to do this, I've already done this, but in order to do this for the first time, you need to enable your script visual. So in case you don't want any R scripts or Python scripts run in your environment, it's totally understandable, in which case you wouldn't be able to use a custom visual like this because it's going to need R or Python running on your machine. So in order to use this visual, we just need to throw in a couple of fields. We'll throw in our date and then that selected metric again, and give it some time to run because it is a pretty in-depth calculation. We see we don't really have much of a forecast there. Let's see if we can extend it out a little bit, maybe change some parameters and see how that forecast can change. Under our formatting, we see these forecast settings. We are forecasting 500 points out in the future. Maybe we'll forecast out 90. And it also has options for seasonality factors, like I was talking about earlier. Let's say our data has a pretty good seasonality factor of month and week. We can see how that will affect our calculation here. See if we can get some accurate predictions. Yeah, we see a little bit more. It's actually able to develop some sort of idea of what we can expect. So a little bit of jitter in there. And with a 50% confidence interval, yeah, the top gray section is a 50% confidence interval. So they're pretty confident that your sales will fall in this range here. So that's how easy it is to set up forecasting in Power BI. You can do it very quickly out of the box, or just take a little bit of time and play with some of the custom visuals that are provided to you through that store. With that, let's go ahead and jump over to row level security, which is a very big topic within Power BI, because row level security allows you to secure your reports within your organization. So let's say user A should only see a certain segment of data. They're only authorized to see maybe their own region. We can set it to where they will never be able to see anything other than their region inherently in the report. So to do that, let's go ahead and jump over to number 6 here. So within Power BI Desktop, we are able to create these roles. Roles are going to be these different permissions for users to be kind of placed into in order to only see those certain segments of data. So if we click on modeling and manage roles, we can create, or I've already created roles here. For example, I have a Europe manager and a North America manager, as well as a cooking gear analyst, the person who should only oversee cooking gear. With these roles already set up, I'll just show you what it'll look like when they're viewing as these roles. There's a helpful button called View As Roles. If we click that, we can now select those roles we have previously set up. So if I only wanted to see the Power BI report from the North America manager's viewpoint, we can click OK. And we can see that user can only see the United States, Canada, and Mexico. If we were to view as a different user, like the Europe manager, we click OK and see that user can only see the European view of the data. So it's very easy to set these up. In order to do so, we just have to type in a little bit of code. Oh, my page is broken from deleting that measure. I will go ahead and set it up on our original file. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete these roles and start over. Okay, I'll save that. And now we're viewing the whole data here. So in order to set up these roles for row level security, we simply click on Manage Roles and create a new role. So we can name this, we'll just do the same example here, Manager Europe. And then we have all of our tables available to us here. In our actual fact table, which is called sales, we can filter down the data based on our columns. So for example, continent equals Europe, if I can spell it right, Europe. So the European manager will only see the data where continent equals Europe. So you can make this as complex as possible, or as complex as you need it to be. So continent equals Europe, year equals 2018, anything you need in this filter expression. So if we click save and then view as that role we just created, we can see the European role. And then just as another quick example, let's create that cooking gear analyst again. Analysts. And then that user specifically can only see, I think is product type equals cooking gear. Click save. And let's view as that role quickly. So that user is only able to see the cooking gear. If we were to expand our product type slicer, we can see that that user only sees cooking gear here. So once you set up these roles in Power BI Desktop, it's very easy to just assign a user in your organization to these preset roles. You can distribute these permissions individually through the UI, or you can also just set it up based on security groups. So if you have users that fall into a certain security group, you can easily say this security group should be this certain role within Power BI. So you can bulk edit users' permissions very easily. So finally, the last trick is email subscriptions. This isn't as much of a trick as it is just functionality within Power BI, but it is functionality that I don't think people use enough. So subscriptions allow users to get a daily emailed report or screenshot of a report in order to basically kind of maybe snapshot your data in time. Also just get a kind of quick glance view of how your metrics are doing. So if we hop on over to Power BI service, we can see our report here. So 7 Power BI tips. So I'm viewing this report right now on this base page. If I were to come up to the top right and click subscribe, I already have a subscription I've created, but I will delete that. Let's go ahead and save and close and start over. So if I were to subscribe, it's going to ask me for some details for this subscription. So we can select a certain tab. So any of the tabs available to us, we'll select base. We can set a subject because this is going to be an email that is sent directly to me. So I can set this is my financial insights subscription. Include an optional message. Specifically, we want the base report page. So this can actually be called anything we want. This is actually, we can name it subscription, for example. So our report page is our base page, but we have any page available to us. We can also set a subscription frequency of daily, hourly, weekly, monthly, or after data refresh up to once a day. So this is pretty handy in case you are only maybe refreshing your data once a day and you want to see your data the moment it's refreshed. Power BI will send you an email screenshot of what the data looks like right after refresh. So I'll set that up to be daily. Specifically, actually let's do hourly. We can set up certain days. So if I only wanted this on weekdays, we can set up our days. And then also the time we want to start. So we can start at 3 p.m. Specifically with a start date and end date in case you only want this to go for a certain period of time. So once you've created all those subscriptions, you can click save and close, and it will set that subscription and it will mail to you whenever that subscription is ready, whenever you set up that schedule. You can also set up subscriptions for every other tab. So since we have like 8 tabs on our report, we can set up a subscription for each tab. So not just that base tab. So just to show you an example of what this looks like, I received one today, and we can see that our subscription one came through with a picture showing us our data as it is today. It says you're receiving this email because you subscribed to the base page. Something to note, I subscribed myself, but if you are an administrator and you aren't actually using row level security, you are able to subscribe as many users as you want. You simply need to type in their emails. And you can see this note right here, you cannot subscribe others because this is using row level security. So if you had just a basic Power BI report, you're able to type in, hey, I also want this sent to someone at someone.com, pretty much anything you need. So those subscriptions are sent out to maybe a larger audience of users. So also this subscription also has a nice link to go directly to the report. You can just open it up quickly. So in case you saw something that stood out in that email subscription, you're able to just open it up in Power BI very quickly. So now you can quickly drill into the data and see maybe what was happening in that quick picture. So with that, that rounds up our 7 Power BI tips and tricks that you should definitely add to your reports to kind of give Power BI more functionality and extend some of the basic uses of Power BI. I hope